Hi, I'm Louis, and today we're going to be deploying Terraform configuration files to AWS from GitHub using GitHub Actions, and we'll also be deploying to another provider, and in this case, it's going to be GitHub. So let's not waste any more time and let's dive straight into the code. Step one is going to be to create a brand new repository. So let's go to the top right, create new repository, and let's just call it Terraform demo. A demo for Terraform. Set it to public and let's add a README and then create the repository. Step two is going to be to clone the repository. So in order to clone the repository, we can click here and copy this link. We can then open our terminal, and if we have Git installed, we can then clear this and we can do git clone and paste that in. Now we should have our repository cloned. Let's open this in VS Code by typing in code, or let's type in ls first. So we can see, we can type in code, Terraform, demo, press enter, and now it should open in VS Code. So step three is now going to be creating the workflow files. So when creating a workflow file, they should be in a specific folder. This folder is going to be doc.github/workflows. Then we can then create the new file within here, and we can call it whatever we want. But in this case, I'll call it deploy Terraform, and the extension should be YAML. Now I have this code here in another window. I'll bring it over here and I'll go through what this code means. Let me make the window a little bit bigger. Let's get rid of this warning. So the first is the name of the workflow, Terraform plan and apply. And then the second is the trigger. So on, whenever we push to a branch called main, this workflow will trigger. And now this is the job section. This is where the work is actually done. So we have one job named Terraform. This job runs on Ubuntu latest and it has a set of steps. So the first step is to check out the code. Checking out the code essentially just means let's copy the code from the repository over to the runner so then it can reference files. In this case, it'll be referencing the Terraform files. The second job we're doing is setting up Terraform. So this is going to allow us to actually use Terraform. The third step is then going to be configuring the AWS credentials. So this is going to use some keys which we're going to set later. Then we're going to run Terraform init as our fourth step. Terraform init sets up and pulls all of our providers and the required modules that we're using. Then we're going to run Terraform plan. What Terraform plan does, it runs your configuration files against existing infrastructure or whatever is currently referenced, and then it will tell you what changes are going to be made. It's not going to make any changes. So what a lot of people do is before it's actually applied, they'll have a manual approval step here. So you can review the changes that are going to be made. And then if you think they're good, you can then apply them by approving that step. Also, one more thing to note that I forgot to mention, here we have GitHub token. This would not be necessary if we were not going to be using the GitHub provider. So if we were using GitHub and just deploying infrastructure to AWS, we wouldn't need this token here. But because after we deploy to AWS, we're actually going to try and create a new repository using the GitHub provider, we need the key here. In the same way that we need the AWS keys to actually make changes to AWS. So let's move on to step number 4. So now for step 4, we have to actually create our Terraform files. So what we'll do is we can create a new file and we can call it main.tf. Now in this file, we're just going to create an S3 bucket using the AWS provider. So I have some code here, which is handy again. And here we can see what it does. So we have a provider in the region EU West 2, and then we're also defining a resource, which is created from this provider, called AWS S3 bucket. And here we can call it Louis-Ormston Terraform-demo bucket. And now we also said that we'll be deploying to GitHub as well. So we can create another file called github.tf. Now, the reason why we can create multiple is because when we run Terraform plan or Terraform apply, it will look in the root directory of wherever the current working directory is, and it will look for any file with the extension tf, and then it will run the plan or apply against that. So what we're going to actually try and create for GitHub is this. We have a provider, GitHub, and the only thing you have to provide here is the owner. So the owner in this case is me, and my GitHub account is L.E. Ormston. If I pull this to the side, we can see that is provided here as well, L.E. Ormston. So whatever your GitHub name is, you can provide that. And then we're also using a resource called GitHub repository, my repo, and then you can provide a bucket name, a description, visibility, and auto init. So here we can change this to, I don't know, demo underscore repo, and we can just get rid of the pre here. So that's amazing. So before we actually push this code and trigger it, it's not going to work because we don't have our keys anywhere. So if you watch the first demo, you'll be familiar with this. So the first key that we have to put in is if we go to settings and we go to secrets and variables, is we have to set the AWS keys. So how can we set the AWS keys? Well, you go to your AWS account. Let me go back to the start so you can see. You can type in IAM, click on IAM, go to users, and then we're going to create a brand new user. So let's call this Terraform-demo. We can click next. We can attach policies directly. I'm just going to give it admin access. In the future, when you have a more stringent policy or you're working in production, don't give it exactly admin access unless it needs it. Just give it access to what it needs. Click next, create user. And now we have something called Terraform demo. We can click on this. We can click on security credentials. We can scroll down, and now we can say access keys. So we can click on create access key. Let's click on command line interface. I understand. Click on next. We don't need to provide a description tag value. We can create the access key, and now we have our access key and our secret access key. So now our job is to put it in to our action secrets. So to do this, we go back to our GitHub. We'll click on new repository secret. Now, if you can't remember what the name is, we should reference it in our VS Code. If I go back to VS Code and we go to our workflow, we can see the first one is called AWS access key ID. So we can copy that over. So AWS underscore access underscore key underscore ID, and we can paste this in from here. Add secret, and now we can add the secret key. So new repository secret. Let's go back to our repository, take this secret name, paste it in, go back to IAM, get the secret access key, go back to GitHub and paste it in, and we add the secret. And now there's one more secret as well that we mentioned as well. The other secret that we mentioned was custom GitHub token. So let's add that as well. So if we go on new repository secret, name, now we've got the custom GitHub token. Then the next step to generate the token is actually to go to the profile. So you go on your profile icon, go then to settings. We can open this link in a new tab. We then scroll down to developer settings. We can then click on personal access tokens, click on tokens classic. Let's generate a new token, a new classic token. Let's, for now, just give it, unfortunately, access to everything. Again, take my advice from before, which is to only give access to what you need to. But in this case, since this is a demo, I'm giving it access to everything as such. And then we'll give it a name as well. So I guess we can call it demo Terraform token and generate the token. Now we've been given the token, we can copy that, go back here, we close this and paste it in. So now we've got our custom GitHub token. And the final step would be to actually push the code. So if we go back to our VS Code and zoom in a bit, we can then open the terminal as such. We can do git status, so see what we've created so far. So we've added some files within the .github workflows. So that would be the Terraform workflow file or the GitHub Actions workflow file. Then we've also created the github.tf, and this includes the provider and the repository resource. And then we've got the AWS provider and main TF with the S3 bucket resource. So let's push these changes. So we've got the workflow and TF files. We can then do a git push origin main. And then we can see what happens. So if we go to the window again, we can then look at the actions for the repository. So we can see this one action has run. So if we have a look at the action, we can click inside and we can see the steps. So first we can have a look at the Terraform plan, and it says, oh, there's going to be a bucket created, of which it doesn't know very much of. And then it says there's also going to be a GitHub repository going to be created. And then it says at the bottom in the plan, there's 2 to add, 0 to change, and 0 to destroy. And then if we go down to the apply, we can see it actually managed to create it. So apply complete. So let's actually have a look and see if these exist. So first, let's have a look at AWS. So we can go in here, we can type in S3. And if we look in S3, we can then see, if we search by Terraform, and we can see Louis-Ormson-Terraform-demo bucket, and it was created at 39 minutes past midnight, which is pretty much when it ran. And then if we have a look at the other resource, which is now going to be the demo, if we have a look, what did we call the demo again? We called the repository my Terraform created repo demo. So we can copy that, go back here, and then let's have a look here. We can go to repositories, and we can see it's created straight away. Yep, it's got the exact same name, and it was updated 3 minutes ago. And we also checked the flag for it to add a README, and it did add a README. So that's a demo complete. I'll leave the repository that we developed all the code in today in the link below. And I want to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you feel that you've benefited. Now you can deploy using Terraform to whichever provider you have access and API keys to. Make sure to remember to store your keys as secrets in GitHub so they're not exposed. And thank you so much. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, like, and if you have any questions, comment below. I'll try and respond to all comments. Thank you so much. Bye bye.